Welcome back to another episode of the Corporate Cowboys podcast. As always, my name is Alex. I'm your host. Today's proof of life. It's Tuesday, February 28th, the last day of the month, 2023. And if you're not already familiar with this layout of the podcast, you're 8 seasons and 3 episodes late. Where you been? Now, these episodes go for about 30 minutes, and I treat it as a free consultation of sorts. What I do in reality is consult and counsel and advocate and represent clients, if necessary, representation and beyond. Represent corporate, or represent corporate cowboys, better yet, right? In that individuals wanting to develop themselves professionally, hold themselves out as valued professionals in their industry, in their career, so that they're able to cultivate a reputation, a persona, a professional image that they can use as leverage to negotiate contracts and employment agreements in their favor, to their favor, right? Ultimately, that's what we want to do. Elevate the individual to the same level as the corporation so that they're empowered in a sense. Obviously, they've got to be worth it, right? Can't hide behind your bullshit identity, your bullshit social identity forever. You've got to come out as a professional. If you're going to come out as anything, you better fucking come out as a professional. Otherwise, you're just as good as dead. All right. Today's episode, that wasn't so much a hot take as it was controversial, but I don't know. Point to me where I'm wrong. Today's episode is coming from r/career advice, which we're more than happy to give. If you find yourself in a position where you need a second look at your life in terms of your livelihood, in terms of your professional development, your career thus far, and opportunities that exist that you just haven't been able to identify, or your next move to make, strategies to deploy, plots and plans, schemes to bring together in order to get ahead, to move up, get compensated more, increase salary, a promotion. If you're in a position where you need that and your immediate circle doesn't have the outlets for you, hit us up. Our rates are more than reasonable. You can find us on Instagram. It's a great way to get in touch with us. You can DM us. That's at Corporate Cowboys with a Z. On Patreon, it's the Corporate Cowboys Podcast. You can find us on Rumble, on YouTube. You can write to us directly. That's P.O. Box 3372, Rancho Cordova, California, 95741. Today's question is asking, I feel like we've answered something similar like this before. It says, how do I respectfully leave a job of 7 years? How do you respectfully leave? You leave it same when you came in, as a professional, as a consummate professional. That's what we all strive to be, right? If you're going to bow out after 7 years, you want to be cordial. Obviously, with the intention of not burning the bridge unnecessarily, right? But if you can keep them in your network as a person of interest, as an employer of interest, to come back to and maybe ask for a letter or an opinion of recommendation, some type of professional referral in the future if necessary. That's probably the best way to do it. How do I respectfully leave a job of 7 years? Obviously, depending on what your employment agreement says, when you first signed on, you want to give them notice. Traditionally, it's been viewed as courteous, as a courtesy to give 2 weeks. Sometimes it's not necessary, right? Sometimes it is. If you're in an at will state, fire at will state, right, where you can leave at a moment's notice, you technically don't even have to leave notice, right? Depending on what the circumstances warrant, what the situation is like. If your boss was an asshole or a prick, then maybe you want to burn that bridge. Maybe notice is not necessary. You just don't show up one day to the next. Or you go off on lunch and don't come back. But that's being petty. That's not as professional as you think it comes off as, right? Even if you think they deserve it. We don't know the entirety, the completeness of one's situation, right? Especially when you're dealing with hypothetical clients. And hypothetical clients aren't always objective in how they view a situation. So, where they see it as treachery, where they see it as motive to implement skullduggery, it might not be the case. It might not be the case. It might be best to maintain a frame of reasonableness, to maintain a frame of professionalism. That's the consummate professional. Even if you do think there is no room for failure, no room for error, you still want to err on the side of professionalism. So this question is asking in the body, it's saying, I, 27, no, sorry, I, a 29-year-old female, not that that fucking matters, I, a 29 female, have decided it's time for me to move on and try something different. Sounds like she just out to continue exploring. I mean, it's she's 29. We don't know much else about her background, educational or experiential as far as her career. If she's been in one place for 7 years, and if that's the only place she's ever been in, right? That all matters. And as a hypothetical client, we would dig deeper on this informational interview. We want to be sure. It says, I've been my boss's only employee for the last 7 years, and we have become friends over time. Ooh, I don't know. That sounds a little tight, man. Sounds a little tight, man. Not like the hangout after work all the time, friends, but we've gotten pretty personal and have gotten cocktails and dinner and things. I feel incredibly anxious and nervous at the thought of having the conversation with her about me leaving. Do I do this over the weekend or during work hours? Do I write a letter? Do I ask her to dinner? What's the most appropriate and respectful way to do this? Edit. She has an edit here, right? So they've included an edit saying, I have an interview next week somewhere. I haven't mentioned anything to her because I thought it would be better to have a job lined up before having that conversation. Is this appropriate to wait until I have a job solidified, or should I tell her I'm searching and plan on leaving? Thanks for your help. If I was your boss, again, depending on the degree that we trust one another, right? And if you've already had this conversation of leaving, then I might be open with them. If your relationship with them is that of a mentor slash mentee, they probably shouldn't care that you're moving on. If anything, they might be happy that you're finally moving on after 7 years. And they might start looking for somebody else, unless you can find a replacement for them. Now, that might be tough to do because you have 7 years of experience working closely with them and their organization, such that you are effectively an executive assistant. How you work, you have tailored to how they work. So replacing you is going to be a little difficult, but not impossible, right? And I completely understand that you don't want to make the situation more uncomfortable than it needs to be. That said, you're already interviewing for other places. And should you get an offer, is when you want to tell your manager that you're thinking of branching out. Now, in this instance, because you're the only employee and you've gotten to know together, you've gotten to know one another to a degree personally, giving them plenty of notice so they start searching for a replacement. That's if they need a replacement, right? Because in 7 years working for them, you may have found ways to automate what it is that you do and leave instructions for someone who's coming in, right? We don't know what industry they're in. We don't know what the organization does. We don't know what their duties are exactly. Me personally, I'm drawing these inferences that they are in the capacity of an executive assistant. Now, assistants are not hard to replace. I would understand if my assistant chose to leave, but from one day to the next, that might surprise me some. Granted, depending on our workload, depending on my workload, because they'd be leaving, depending on my workload, it may not put an absolute stop to my operations. Again, that depends on how much I was relying on the executive assistant to do things for me. It would be nice if they told me in advance that they were leaving so that I could ask of them and or negotiate with them ways to keep them or some method of transitioning while I hire somebody else. If they could train them, obviously there would be some compensation due because now they would effectively become a supervisor, an interim supervisor, temporary, but still, I feel anybody who is working to supervise another individual, another human, and responsible for their professional development, I feel like they should be compensated fairly. And not many employers believe that. So maybe I'm one of the chosen few. That being said, it might be best to do it while you're at work, right? Because if you're their only employee, it's not like they can send you home. I feel like any way you approach this, it's as if they can't send you home immediately. They're not going to cut your schedule short. You know what? I feel betrayed unless they were petty or unless you're actually dealing with materials, with sensitive materials, materials that require a clearance or some kind of vedance for you to work with, right? And if you're being scouted, if you're being recruited, or if you're prospecting another employer, shit, it might behoove me to not allow you access to our files anymore. Ultimately, in order to move up professionally, I think it's tough to put yourself in a losing situation if you approach your manager with the truth, right? Now, it may be, depending on exactly what your situation is like with them, that you want an offer in hand. And I do hope that when you're out there interviewing, you're mature enough to let them know that you're currently employed and that you would need some time to transition, right? You can't start you're not available to start immediately unless you just want to pull out of your current work agreement, pull out of your current arrangement without notice, right? That would effectively burn a bridge. So I think some time to notify them, your current manager, some time to notify them, and time to transition, I think, is in order. Now, some may not agree, but when you're dealing with professional relationships, you have to take into account not just your career, but their career and the career that you've, I hope, helped one another build together because you've effectively worked together for 7 years. It could have been 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and any number of reasons for you to leave after 7 years. Maybe you no longer want to work 12 hours, 16 hours a day, or be on call constantly, right? You want to see what else is out there. You want to move up. And if you are what you claim you are, that is friends, right? Then there's an even deeper element of trust. Me, myself, I'm straightforward with my associates. I think friends and best friends are not the best keepers to have, are not are not the best keepers to have around in your career, because when you open up yourself too much and you've shared or gotten pretty personal, like you claim here, if you've gotten pretty personal, I don't know what that means to a 29-year-old female, right? And again, not that it fucking matters, but if you've gotten pretty personal, you might have shared some intimate things where, for the sake of pettiness, could come back and bite you in the ass now that you want to leave your employer. And see, that's why I keep it professional. Even if you do go out for cocktails and dinner, keep it strictly professional. Your personal life is your personal life. Your professional life is your professional life. I understand that sometimes connection and networking requires you to open yourself up some. But, I mean, getting pretty personal, I don't know. You already make it sound like you're living a double life, the personal and the professional. And now you may be worried about what respectfully even means, how your manager, how your boss might interpret being respectful in this circumstance. I mean, it's not on you. It's not all on you. You learn through trial by fire, right? And some of the comments, which I will get to, some of the comments may touch on that fact, right? That the fact now that you are their only employee, and above that you've gotten pretty personal, you've developed a friendship of sorts. Some people are just gonna outright say, "Nah, give them your 2 weeks and fucking bounce," right? I mean, it's Reddit after all. They're gonna say, "Nah, give them your 2 weeks, fucking dip out. It's nothing." Others are gonna say, "Oh no, you should definitely stick around and help them transition." Me, as a corporate cowboy, to this hypothetical client who I would like to convert to a corporate cowboy, right? That's our mission after all, is to cultivate, to convert more corporate cowboys so you can move professionally. I would ask enough questions to determine whether or not just the truth is what you need. Just honesty, being straightforward. You give them enough notice, and it might be enough time. It might be some time for your manager to evaluate their career, their organization, whether it's time to expand or it's time to contract. It's time to consolidate, if you will. Not that you want to stick around for another 7 years, but it could open up more opportunity to continue building with what you already know, using the experience you've already accumulated. It's never a bad thing. You can make more money, learn more, take on more responsibilities, be accountable for more measures of the business, maybe get a larger share, a larger interest in the organization itself, right? And because we don't have the hypothetical client in front of us, I can't ask those questions. What it is they do, how they do it, what does the manager do, how do they do it? In order to create, and innovate on what it is they already do without having to pull out, without having to extract. As a manager, it would feel shitty. You're working with somebody 7 years and they're only going to give you 2 months before they pull the rug from out under you. Sure, this late in the game, right? I've learned enough as a professional that I shouldn't have all of my eggs in one basket, right? I've got to diversify my order of operations so as to not rely on one person, on one entity. I've got to be self-reliant as much as possible and outsource what I think is feasible, what makes my work more efficient. But that isn't to say that approaching your manager with the truth and being straightforward is not a viable option. Doing so could also change the trajectory, the trajectory of your career to learn more, to do more, to earn more, and continue building on what you already have. Now, if you're already looking for a job and you're already interviewing, well, then you've made a decision. I mean, you could still turn, and if you want to get grimy, I guess. I mean, would you do this to a friend though? If you want to, if you want to get grimy, you could say, "Hey, I got an offer from a job, and they're paying me this much more, or they're allowing me to do this. They're giving me certain liberties, certain pathways, options to develop myself professionally." You could work at forcing your manager's hand, but again, would you do that to a friend? No. But by being open, by leveraging the fact that you have a friendship together, you've gotten pretty personal, by leveraging that fact, you are in a better position to massage your options, to see what's new, to see what else you can do with the manager or without them. It introduces a degree of philosophy to your conversations between your manager and yourself. And if you claim you've already gotten pretty personal, why not get philosophical and bring it full circle to professional? And if they can't offer what it is you're looking for, you see, this is higher level consulting here. And I'm going off of little to no context from these questions. But there is a way to maneuver yourself and necessarily have the manager work to develop you professionally. And if they can't, have them admit it. Essentially, not forcing their hand, but converting them into a de facto mentor. And when you outgrow them, the hope is, right? Because they could still say they don't want you to leave, but the hope is they recognize that you've grown to a level that they cannot sustain. And so you should move. You should move ahead and apply outside. Apply what you've learned with them. Sharpen what it is you've learned with them. Distill it into something marketable and take the world for yourself. Enter the fray that is the corporate war. I say that just about every episode. I just throw it in there because I want it to be in the back of folks' minds that you're born into this system. You are born into this system. You live, you grow up, and you die in it. Even if you do move to some remote part of the woods and you claim to be off the grid. You were born on the grid first and you ran away. It's a bitch move if you ask me. But I understand it to some extent. That said, let's take a look at some of these comments here and I'll critique them if I can. How much time do I got? I got about 4 or 5 minutes. Why not? The first comment here says, even with your long work history there, I wouldn't tell your boss that you're going to start job hunting. Why not? Why not? See, I went through and I detailed the facts for you, right? You are their only employee. Unless you're handling, I don't know, radioactive materials or a client's personally identifiable information or other trade secrets, they're not going to cut you out immediately. It may take some time for them to understand that you're leaving, or it may put them on their heels and recapacitate, rethink, reevaluate their modus operandi and how they could keep you in the loop, how they could keep you in the fold and not leave. Maybe they innovate. Maybe they improve processes, missions, visions, objectives in order to keep you around. Oh, you want to develop? Oh, Alex, you want to leave me? You want to develop yourself? Why don't I help you develop so you don't have to leave? And therein lies the opportunity to develop professionally yourself with the help, with the facilitation of your employer. And you could still get paid more. You're the one in a position of power. You become the one in a position of power. What you take with you if you leave them, it's 7 years of assistance, 7 years of dependability, of reliance. You are effectively in a position of power to bargain, to improve your lot in life, while at the same time helping them improve theirs by staying on and working with them. Notice how I said working with them. That's the whole theme of this podcast. It's one of the many overarching themes of this podcast, is to learn to work with corporate. And everybody is a representative. Learn to work with them, not for them. You are a representative of corporate. You want people working for you? You want to be responsible for what they do? Or would you like them to be responsible for what they do professionally? How nice of it would it be for everybody to include one another in their plans for development, to incorporate, to integrate, right? If there's any place where assimilation can occur, it's going to be the mutual goals of improvement. Granted, you do run into some sociopathic motherfuckers who need extra legal help to see their way out, right? But otherwise, you've got yourself to look out for. And if you're working with somebody else, you have them to look out for too, because you are working together. You don't necessarily owe one another anything unless it gets to it. It's favor for a favor when you're a mob figure of sorts. And this person is saying no matter how close you are, don't tell them shit. I wouldn't tell your boss that you're going to start job hunting. I mean, you've already started job hunting. Best thing you could do right now is to tell your boss. Personally. Again, we don't know the extent of how pretty personal they got in terms of friendly. But if you're open with them, you give them a better chance, especially because you're their only employee, a better chance that a recommendation or a referral comes from them. And you don't have to explain a 7-year gap in your resume. That might be one of the quickest ways to burn a bridge. But if you're a professional or if you need coaching on how to approach this conversation, if you need it, or if you know an associate that needs professional coaching on career moves and how to do them, by all means, have them reach out to us. Continuing this comment, it says, look for another job, and if you accept another offer, put in your 2-week notice or whatever the expected term is for your employer. I would submit my resignation notice in writing. When your boss, well, yeah, obviously want it to be in writing because that way you keep receipts, right? When your boss asks why you're leaving, have an honest and respectful conversation with them, explaining why you're leaving, or don't. That part is up to you. This person sounds like they give 2 fucks about the boss's situation, right? And I mean, it's understandable, but being a consummate professional also implies that you care for people and where they are at their level of professional development and their stage of professional development. Now, if you've been working with them and there's moments or there's times or regularly, I guess, you come off as unprofessional, being really casual, right? Again, I don't know what degree of friendship you have with your boss, but if you are uber casual and then just one day spring on them, hey, I'm giving you a 2-week notice and I'm leaving, you think anything good is going to come from that? You think anything good is going to come from that besides a new job? That's not something I want to carry. That's not something I want to carry on my conscience. I would much rather have a body than a witness, if that makes sense. I don't know. That got pretty dark. I would much rather have bodies than witnesses. Leave a body, not a witness. Damn, I gotta put that. I gotta send that to social media. Right on, right on. When your boss asks you why you're leaving, have an honest and respectful conversation with them, explaining why you're leaving. So you're gonna wait, right? You're gonna wait until you give them the notice, and then when the boss is taken aback, we've been working together for 7 years. Why are you leaving? You think you're gonna be able to have an honest and respectful conversation if you haven't trained, if you haven't planned for that conversation? You need to be training and planning for that conversation now. You don't want it to be inappropriate. You don't want it to be uncomfortable, right? Assessing your circumstances, whether or not being open and honest up front gives you the upper hand, right? I mean, you have the upper hand regardless, but how early you want to exercise it and how subtle you want to exercise it. That's why I went with being straightforward from the get-go, from the jump. Tomorrow, if you can, bring up the idea that you want to continue developing professionally, right? And we go through that line of thought. And that's higher level counseling. Again, you introduce the notion, the idea that you want to continue improving professionally and that you've seen offers. You're aware they exist and how much they pay. You see? You see what I'm getting at? That way your manager starts to sweat without actually feeling the heat. Because it will get heated. It can. There's a higher propensity, greater likelihood that it gets heated if you just spring a 2-week notice on them and say, "Yo, I'm leaving." And if they ask why, you think you're gonna muster up enough professionalism then to maintain respect and honesty? I would much rather not trip over my words and walk them through my exit than run out and risk tripping on the way. But again, nothing we distribute, nothing that we convey as far as messaging is meant to be construed as legal advice. If you haven't engaged us, or if we're not representing you directly, right? And that's why I've been mentioning this hypothetical client, because they don't exist. Pretend as if they don't exist. But you take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. While you're taking notes, whether they be on paper or in your mind, while you're taking notes and incorporating how to be a better professional, how to move like a corporate cowboy, you take what I say with a grain of salt, because every person's case is different. Every person's life is unique. Every person's circumstances are individual. And so every corporate cowboy needs to learn how to shoot from the hip, from their hip. That takes time, that takes practice, that takes training and development. One more comment, then I'm out. I think I'm over. Yeah, I'm over by like 5 minutes, but I'll give you one more. It says, I just retired after working for 48 years. Ooh, we got a retiree. This is good. No matter how comfortable you are in a position, never let yourself be confused that it is a family. Yo, this sounds all right. This sounds good. This sounds good. You are not working to make their life easier. You are working to create your own life and advantages. You can certainly respect someone and still move on to the next job. And a good boss will feel sad that you're going, but totally understand you have to do what's right for you. The nail on the head. This person hit the nail right on the head, and I brought that up. Depending on the type of relationship that you keep with your manager, because it's not always beneficial to keep friends, right? But if you've developed a relationship like a mentor-mentee, it'll be that much easier to introduce the idea, to plant the seed that you've outgrown them, or that you want something they cannot offer. And if they're mature enough, they will recognize that it's your time to go, and will actually encourage you to leave in some situations. If you've been in a position for 7 years and you're still, I don't know, making appointments or filing papers or doing something menial, something routine, yeah, maybe it pays well, but if it's not edifying you, if it's not developing you professionally, yeah, you might see it as a dead end, and your boss might see it as a position for someone who hasn't been with them for 7 years. They might already know it, but the fact that you won't leave, well, shit, they're comfortable with the fact that Alex has been here for 7 years, and I can count on Alex because Alex knows what to do. Alex knows how to get it done. But at the same time, my mentor would recognize Alex has been here for 7 years and has done nothing else with their life. How much more of a professional could we make Alex if Alex wanted it? And the fact you want to leave is that want that you can leverage to your benefit as a corporate cowboy. See, that's some corporate cowboy shit. I'll catch y'all later. Have a nice one.